Welcome back to another video in our Basics of the WAMZ Stack series. That is quite a mouthful, and essentially in the last couple of videos we have put together a database on Airtable, and we've also put that same database together on Webflow, and we've even created this nice repeating data list with lots of lovely pictures of dogs and a lovely form at the bottom. Now what we're going to do is look at how we can use this form to send data to Zapier and then use Zapier to send that data back to Webflow and Airtable, allowing us to display it and essentially starting to make this function as a proper web app. Now a couple of things to note. First of all, Webflow on its own at current does not let you take data from a form and then put that straight back into Webflow. At some point in the future it will let you do that, and that will probably change the game in a fair way. But regardless, Zapier is always going to have a place in the WAMZ stack because Zapier lets you do so many different things with your data. But for the minute, if we want to take data and put it back into the CMS or put it into Airtable, then we have to take our form and submit it to Zapier. The second thing to know is, if you do want to connect a Webflow form to Zapier, then you must first publish your website and then go and submit at least one form through it. So let me just show you what I mean by that. Up the top right hand corner here, I've got these options around publishing, and I can either put it to ratemydoggy.webflow.io, which is just a testing domain generated by Webflow based on the name of the website. Or I can choose to put in a custom domain. So for example, if I bought the domain name, ratemydoggy.com, then I could connect that here and put it through. I've got no idea if it's a real domain name. I don't really want to look it up because it could be something dodgy. So we'll just publish it to ratemydoggy.webflow.io. And if I've still got the website running by the time you're watching this video, then you might be able to click that yourself. But I do have a limit on how many things I can put in my Webflow account, so I'll probably delete it, I'm afraid. However, here we are on the actual real live website. I can do this on desktop, I can do it on mobile, I can do it on my iPad, whatever I like. And if I scroll up and down, I'll see all the data we looked at, and I'll see my form here. So I can go ahead and select the dog. Let's pick Milka, and I'm going to leave a rating of Milka. I'm going to put that as literally the cutest puppy. I think it's a puppy. Cutest, oh my god, I can't spell. Cutest puppy I have ever seen. And I'm going to rate that dog 5 out of 5 and submit my rating. Now it's just going to say thank you, your submission's been received, and nothing happens. We can configure things to happen. For example, you can tell Webflow to send it to a page that confirms a submission, but we're not going to bother. What I can do is hit refresh up the top left hand corner, and the form's immediately refreshed. So this is a really important step for two reasons. Number one, it is the absolute crucial key of how users interact with your Webflow site during the use of a WAMZ stack website. And number two, now that we've submitted that form through, we can actually go ahead and use Zapier now to pull forms through. Now I already submitted a test one by myself, so I already knew it worked, but what we would do is we essentially come in Zapier and we hit make a zap. So it's a nice big button right on the side, it is impossible to miss. And if we come into Zapier, as you've probably seen if you've watched any of our other Zapier videos, you can immediately start searching through different tools, etc. to see what you've got. Clearly we're looking for Webflow. Now every WAMZ workflow is going to start here. It's going to start when something comes through Webflow, and it's almost always going to be when a form submission is made. You do have the option here for a new order or an updated order. That is for the e-commerce side of Webflow. We're not going to bother with that, so we're just going to hit form submission and hit continue. Now if I pop in here, I've registered a couple of different Webflow things, so I can go there and it's going to bring me up a list where I can pick my site name. If I type in rate my doggy, I've got a couple of options there, but I'm going to pick rate my doggy. It just lets me pick whatever site I've got, and then I can pick the form name. Now this one was called the rating form, and if I double check back here on Webflow and I double click into this, and if I pick the, this is quite hard to do. There you go. If I hit the form, then I can see up the top I've called it rating form, and consequently when I go back to Zapier there, get too many tabs open, then I can see my rating form there as well. And I've just got so many tabs open so you can see all the different pages that we've got here on Webflow. So immediately what I can do is I can test my trigger. And again, this is all really important because this is the foundation of everything that we are going to do on the WAMZ stack. So you can see all this data has come through. Every different field that I've got in a Webflow form is going to be pre-appended with data and then a double underscore and then the name of the field. Now for some reason that field is called dog2. That would just be a mistake on my side. I'm not sure why I did it. But if I look back, yep, the ID there is dog2. I can change it to just dog or whatever I like. But this name in the ID field is the key part. So I've got the comment. Again, it's probably called 2 because I had another input field in there. But, you know, hopefully it would just be called comment when you do it. So we've got, you know, this is literally the cutest puppy I've ever seen, which is what I just wrote. We've got the rating as a number as well. So if I hit continue, then essentially what that's just told us is that Zapier trigger is working. We did get the correct form data through, and now we need to go and do something with it. So we're going to do a few steps here. Number one, we're going to go to Airtable because we need to find this CMS ID for the dog. Now that we know the dog is Milka, we need to go find out what Milka's ID is from Airtable, because that's then going to let us go and update our rating on the Webflow CMS and actually add in Milka as the specific dog. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And the first thing that we need to do is search up the particular record. So we can, and now in Airtable we can do this thing called find record. Lots of different Zapier tools have this option to do what you call a search, which is when you go and find a specific piece of data. This is going to be a key thing that you use again and again in the WAMZ stack. This is going to let you find whatever data you need out your Airtable, and as a result it is incredibly important. So again, it sets up similar to the Webflow trigger. We go in, I look for the doggy database, I pick the particular table that we need in this case, which is going to be dogs. If I needed ratings, I could look for that, but I don't. We're going to search by field, and this is going to pull back all the different fields. So all of these should be very, very familiar because they are all the same fields that we have got in our dogs table. If I pop back there, let me just close that Zapier tab, it's getting annoying. So if we go there, we can then put in the search value. So what we want to do here is we want to search, we essentially want Zapier to find the row in Airtable that matches the dog name we just got through our Zapier form. So if I look here, I've got the data dog2, which if we remember, dog2, again, poorly named, but is our select field. So if you want to select a dog, it goes through that dog2 field. Again, if you were doing this, you would call it whatever name you like. It could be dog2, it could be dog name, it could be random field of text, whatever you're going to call it for your particular app. But we know that the data we're looking for is this word Milka, so we're going to select that. And now you do have these other options here, like limit the view, search formula, etc. You don't need them, so we're just going to ignore them for now. And you do always get this little issue. Sometimes this flashes up an error, sometimes it doesn't. Let's just see. You must provide either search by field and search value or search formula. Let me double check what I did wrong there. And we'll go back and see. So we'll go back to choose account. It was the wrong bit actually. Yeah, we'll go back here. So search formula or search value. Now we did add a search value in there. So there, oh sorry, search by field. That's the bit that I'm missing. I forgot to select that we are looking by name. So that's the problem there. So we go and continue. And again, let's hit test. Sometimes an error does flash up here on Zapier. It's a problem I keep getting. I haven't found a solution for. You might have seen it in other videos. But it looks like in this instance it worked, because now you can see in Zapier we've pulled through all of this different information. We've got the CMS ID, which is about what we need. We've got the dog name, dog breed, and now we've got all the information we need. So we're going to hit close and we're going to add a new step. Now this is where things start to get really interesting. We're going to select Webflow again. But this time, instead of being a trigger that kicks off this workflow, it's actually going to be an action. And so we can do a lot more stuff. We can create a new CMS item, we can create, we can update an item, we can do all this stuff with orders we're not fussed about. But the really interesting one here is creating a live item or updating a live item. Now, you've got an option here, create item or create live item. And what we mean by that is if you create an item, then it's going to show up in the Webflow CMS as a draft, which means it's unpublished. You would need to go in and manually publish it or use an API call to publish it as well. You're also going to have create live item, which means it will not only create the item in the CMS, but it will publish it, so it will show up on your website straight away, and you'll be surprised at how quickly it actually works. So we're going to hit create live item, because what we want to do is create a rating for the dog and add it straight onto the website. So again, we're going to go through the rigmarole of selecting the exact account, and again that is because you could push data between multiple Webflow websites if you wanted. Again, we're going to go rate my doggy, excuse me, and for a collection we are going to go for ratings this time, because we're going to update the ratings. So immediately it's going to pull back all this different CMS data. We've got the rating comment, the rating number, the dog, the name, the slug. If I look back at the CMS, that all sounds familiar. Let's just double check. Well, yep. Because if I go and hit new rating, then it's going to ask me for the name, the slug, the rating comment, the rating number, and the dog. So that all makes perfect sense. So now if we go to the rating number, well, we've already got that number in here. So the rating is 5 for this particular rating. And for the rating comment, if we go back here, and then what Webflow is letting us do here again is just go back and pick all the variables from each step. So I want to take the variables from when we actually picked the form up. I want to pick up the comment, and again it's just going to put in that as literally the cutest dog I've ever seen. Now here's where things get interesting. In this field we can put in the dog. Now, I'm going to show you something, and there's a couple of little tips here. So we're just going to go in and we're going to set the CMS ID as you would expect. And that way, essentially what we're saying is, if I go in here, and if I hit new rating, and if I see dog, and I can select a different dog, and this is because it's through the interface, but when we do it with Zapier, we don't have that interface to pick from, because there could be one dog or there could be a million dogs depending on how many items are in your CMS, and so we need to use a unique identifier. This might be familiar if you watched the API and integrations pillar that we did in the Fundamentals series, because when we looked at how you actually read API documentation and make an API request with a Webflow API, this is the kind of thing we did. We used the CMS ID, we push data in via the API. All Zapier is an interface on top of an API. It's just a simple way to send API calls between places, and so all we're really doing here is exactly what we did in that APIs and integrations video, except we're doing it via Zapier. And it's a lot easier to do it that way. So we then have all this different stuff here. In terms of a name, you do have to give it a name, which is usually where you want to do something kind of random. So one thing that you can do, for example, is just give it the ID, and then you could do a hyphen, and then you could do, and then you could just do the submitted at date. Hopefully that should work. I'm not 100% sure if it will. But usually whenever you're doing this, you're kind of trying to find a unique way to do a name. Another thing that you could do is Zapier has this kind of math, what's it called again? Formatter by Zapier. And it's got this little action that you can do that will generate random numbers, but essentially on every Webflow CMS item you have to give it a unique name. If you're doing ratings, you're not going to ask somebody for a name, because why would a rating have a name? You just have all the information we asked for. And therefore, you might want to just play around with different variables to get something quite unique. Another thing that we could do actually is we could just do the dog name. So we could do something like that. We could combine that with some other sort of data from here. So we could do it like that. And then we could just pop something in. Or you could just make the rating itself the name. Again, this might work, it might not. There's a few different reasons. You can leave the slug blank. Webflow will generally automatically generate that. And then archived, we're going to set to false, because we don't want it to be archived, and draft will set to false as well. We're trying to publish a live item here, so we really don't want to set it to draft or anything like that. And then we'll hit continue. Now this will probably not work, and I'll show you why. Let's hit test and review. Excellent, it did work. And you can immediately see some information comes back here, but let's go and see the most interesting part, which is how does it look on Webflow. And I'll tell you why I didn't think it was going to work in just a second, but let's just refresh it and watch. So if we go into the Webflow CMS, now that I've refreshed the page, if I look in ratings, there you go. I've got this big random long name of a string. We don't really need the name for the name, like, we don't really care about what the name is, so that's why it's just such a big mess. But if we have a look at the rating, all of that data has been passed in here. There you go, you've got the comment, there you go, you've got the rating number, and actually we've also got the dog name, which is really interesting, because what we can now do is go into the dog template, and we can actually make that rating appear. So I could just do something like, let's throw a collection list in there. Now we don't have one for Mocha yet, so we better just switch over to Milka. Let's throw a collection list in there, let's do it by ratings. And what I can do on the right hand side is I can go filter that. So I can say filter by the ratings, where the dog equals the current dog. Oops. And what that's going to mean is it recognises that we're on a dogs template for Milka specifically, or whatever dog it might be, and so it's just going to show up the ratings which refer only to that dog. And then I can simply take a heading, drag it in there, we'll set that to H3. Again, this doesn't have to look good, we're just making it nice and basic. There's a rating comment. Now, it says that dog's so fluffy because when I created that default one earlier called number 6, there you go, that's a comment, it was assigned to Milka. I could equally go and assign that to Malka instead, hit save, take that off, and it's going to disappear, but when I go to Malka, it's going to show that dog is so fluffy. Now that's quite basic and ugly, but that's okay, we're just trying to show you how the functionality works. Now let's go back to Zapier. So when we go back to Zapier, essentially what we've done there is we've created a CMS item, and the one thing that we have to pay attention to is at the very bottom it's given us back this ID number. So what we kind of have is we've created it in Webflow, but we haven't updated it in Airtable. We still have that default one called 6 from earlier, but we've not added a new one. So what I can do is I can go in and add this and then go Airtable. Now we've got the same menu we had from earlier, except instead of finding a record we're going to create a record. And that will take us back through the rigmarole. Let's choose our Airtable account, let's hit continue, let's pick a base, which is doggy database, let's pick a table, and this time we're going to pick ratings. Now the ID we're going to leave blank, because even though we made this custom ID for Webflow, we don't need it on here because Airtable generates its own, and we don't need a common identifier because the unique identifier is actually going to be the CMS ID. So again, if we go for rating, we'll add in the rating that came through. So, it'll be in the form submission. So what do we get? Well, the rating was 5, so we'll add that piece of data, that variable in there. What was the rating comment? Well, again, we're going to take that from the form. So there you go, there it's there. Now the CMS ID we're not going to take from the form submission, we're actually going to take from the live item. So we've got this item here, ID. What the CID is, by the way, you might think that stands for CMS ID, it actually stands for collection ID. So the collection of ratings or the collection of dogs, depending on which one you're using, each of them have a unique ID as well. We're going to ignore that, we actually want just the item ID, which is called ID. Again, if that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, watch the API and integrations pillar where we specifically go through the Webflow API, because I kind of explain the difference in a little bit more detail there. So we've got all that, and then in terms of the dog, what you can actually just do here, you've got a couple of options. You could put in the ID, you could put in the name. Let's try the ID, that should do the trick. And then the CMS rollup we're going to ignore because that will get automatically generated. The user CMS ID we're also going to ignore. We'll hit continue, we'll hit a test in that. Again, this might break because I'm having some issues with Airtable at the minute, but let's try it. Record was sent to Airtable just now, okay, and there you go. Not only is it linked, which is pulling through the CMS ID, but we've got that CMS ID in there. What does it say at the end? 8E3B6, okay, let's check CMS and see if that's right. 8E3B6, there you go. So that is all matching up, and now what we've essentially done is we've taken data from the website, we've put it through Zapier, we've saved it to Airtable, we've saved it to Webflow, we've now got a common record we can use if we ever want to update that rating, change it, do whatever we like. It's all there, it's all easy. Now I want to show you one other cool little thing. We did say we would kind of count up the total rating count for each dog, and so what we can do is we can add an extra step here, and we can do a little bit of math. So I mentioned that format step earlier, and I've used this in other videos, but essentially format lets you just do things like capitalize text, replace text, work with numbers, do stuff like grab the current date, all sorts of little utilities. I highly recommend, if you're going to use the WAMZ stack, come in and look at this formatter, because it's going to be the backbone of a lot of your logic. But what we're going to do is do a little bit of math, because we want to get the total rating count, which means we have to count up all of the ratings that are relevant to this dog. And so what we're going to do is, if we just save that rating, that total rating count in Airtable, then what we'll do is every single time that we take a new rating, we'll just quickly calculate what the new rating should be and we'll update it. So we're going to transform, and you've got all these things like format, etc., but we just want to perform a math operation. This interface, as I've mentioned in other videos, is a little bit confusing, but bear with me. You can pick different stuff, like do you want to divide, multiply, what we want to add, because we're going to add the total rating count, which is currently 0, to whatever rating just came in. And then we can do the input, so it's kind of saying, well, what data do you want to use? Well, I want to use this total ratings count. Now it says 0 today. Tomorrow it could be 5, it could be 10, it could be 300, depending on how many people are using this. We want to add that to the rating that came in via the form. So what we are saying here is add 0 plus 5, sure, but what we're actually saying is take the variable of the total rating count for this particular dog as found in step 2 and add that to step 5, or sorry, add that to the number 5 that we got through the first step, so that variable. So there we go. So we're adding the existing rating count with the new rating. And if we do some math, the answer we're expecting is 5. Let's hit test and continue. There you go, output 5, boom, done. And then we're just going to add again, and again we're going to go to Airtable, because now we've got that total rating, we need to add that to Airtable. And usual rigmarole through doggy database. This time we're going to add the total rating to dogs, so we're going to update that. We're going to say, which record do we want? Well, we want the record that we found earlier, so we're going to hit custom, we're going to hit find record, we're going to grab that, so that will make sure we get the right record. We're going to take the total rating count and we're going to change that to what we just got out there. So again, let's use that variable we just calculated, total is 5, continue, hit test and continue. Alright, brilliant, we've changed it in Airtable and we've got one last change to make. And if you've been following along, you'll notice this is hyper inefficient, which I'll show you in a minute, but I just want to show you how the update live action works. So we've already created our Webflow CMS item. Well, actually, we already created the rating, but the dog already existed anyway. So we're going to update a live item, and that just means it'll make the changes and do them live. So instead of creating a rating this time, we are going to update the dog's total rating. And let me just check I made a CMS field for that, because I don't remember if I did. Did I? New dog. Yeah, I did, total rating, brilliant. I wasn't sure if I'd missed that. So, again, we're going to have to change our website. So, rate my doggy collection. This time we're going to update the dogs. And it's going to ask for an item. And what that means is it wants the item ID. So I can just go back to my find record from the start, where we looked up Milka and Airtable. I can grab that CMS ID, which means I immediately now know which record I'm trying to update on Webflow, and you can start to see how these two databases interface. I've got the total rating. I'm going to go to the updated record in Airtable, or I could just take the number, sorry. Just take that. Now I've got the total rating. I can ignore all these descriptions or these fields, I don't need them. I've always got to set archived to false and draft to false. If you did want to use this step to also push them into draft or archive, you could, but I don't really know why you would want to do that. The name, sometimes it's going to, so this is why I said earlier, don't bother with required fields unless you need to, because the problem you're going to have is every single time you send an API request, whether you want to change that field or not, you're going to have to use, you're going to have to put required fields in, which means I have to get the name exactly right. Now that could be a little bit daunting because, well, you know, the name could be something like that. Obviously this time I'm changing the dog, so the name's a little bit simpler. But again, you don't really want to mess around with all that kind of stuff. Now, if you were updating an item you'd already created with a big fancy name, you could just pull the variable in. Thankfully, we're not doing that. We're just updating Milka, so I'm just going to grab the name there. Hit continue. Now let's see if this works. So we've just hit it through. Zapier has confirmed that it was successful, but let's check the data actually showed up. And by the way, when Zapier says something successful, it is always worth checking that it is actually successful, because sometimes Zapier will say something went through, but it didn't quite come through the way you wanted it to. However, if I check dogs and Milka, the total rating is now 5. Now let me show you the power of that, because if we now hit turn on Zap, that now just works. And I'm going to just give it a quick name. And by the way, I mentioned earlier this is inefficient. It is because I've added another 2 update steps there. Actually what I could have done is I could have taken this number calculation We could have done the calculation as step 3. We could have then updated Airtable as step 4. We could have then created that record on Airtable. We could have then done one big upload to Webflow. So this is inefficient. This should actually be 5 steps, I think. But just to give you an idea of how that works. So we'll call this update doggy rating. And that's now just running, that's just it. So I can just go here, refresh that page. I don't really have to refresh the page, but just to show you. So I'm now going to go, okay, I want to update Milka again. I'm going to say, I love this dog's ears. I'm going to hit 5 again. That's sent through, refresh that. Let's make one change actually. Let's just update our homepage to show the dog rating. So I'll tell you what, we'll do this, push that again. This time I'm going to change that text to say total rating, format, there we go. Now it's not going to show up because there's no rating set for that dog just yet. Let's just quickly set a rating for all of them. There you go, set 1 for honeybee, save changes. 1 for, sorry, set 0 actually, just to keep this matched up with the Airtable database, set 0. I'm just setting this data so I can show you this. So we've now got those set up as 0, and we see Milka's rating immediately coming through as 10. Let's refresh that again. Let's just republish that so we get the changes. Whenever you make a change to a Webflow site in the editor, if you want it to show up live, then you have to do it. You have to publish it. However, any data changes we make through Zapier, because we're making a live item, will show up immediately. So Milka's now 10. All right, cool. Let's write another one. Let's write this dog has massive paws despite its small size. I've got no idea if that's true. I'm going to make it rating 4. I'm just saying it. Now we refresh that page. Now it might take a couple of refreshes before anything shows up because there's a little bit of a delay because you're going through Zapier, you're adding stuff to Airtable, etc. But there you go. You know, within less than 5 seconds, the rating's now updated to 14. I could set honeybee's rating. So we'll do honey. This dog is very grumpy, but it is funny. I'm writing these as if I'm 5 years old, I know. We'll just set honeybee's rating to 5. Hit submit. And again, we can refresh. We go and check the Airtable. Then the data's already shown up there. But, oops, wrong tab, getting mixed up. Oh my god, I'm still getting mixed up with my tabs. I've hit enter there. Then again, it's already started updated with 5. So immediately what we can see is data's pulling through. You know, it's adding to the pages. It's immediately showing up. And essentially we've just created a loop here where all the data we create is showing up here. You know, you can see it's updating stuff in Airtable. We've got this logic working. We've got this data working. And we've got a real actual usable application that can be clicked through, you know. So all sorts of really, really cool stuff you could do there. And if we go to, which I think will be dogs/Milka, this should take us to our template page. Yep, there you go. And I can see all the different data that I set up there showing through. Easy peasy. So there you go. That in a nutshell is how you can use a WAMZ stack to start sending data around, connecting it to various different places, and essentially you have your front end and your back end in one there. Now the last thing left to show you is how do you make this secure? So how do you make sure, for example, that only someone who's logged in can rate a dog? But still, you know, leave certain pages visible or certain elements visible. Well, that is where we get to the M in the WAMZ stack, the last part, member stack. So in the next video, we'll jump in here, we'll explore how this works, and we'll take it from there.